Hello friends and welcome to the start of a new writing vlog. In my video, I don't remember which video it was, I think it was my video on all my projects, I said that I would be happy to do a Q&A answering questions on my book projects. However, pretty much no one asks questions on my book projects, so message received, you guys don't care about my book projects. That's fine. However, a few people ask questions on other things, and the most common question people asked was some variation of how do you not get overwhelmed and how do you write during the pandemic? First of all, the first thing I wanted to say is it's totally okay if you're struggling to write during the pandemic. I've had periods of the pandemic where I barely wrote. I found it really hard at the beginning because, you know, I never considered myself someone who gets ideas from my life because normally my ideas are not informed by my day-to-day life. But not going anywhere, seeing people, or doing anything made it so there was basically nothing to draw ideas from, and I don't think I realized how much I relied on that just constant undercurrent of things happening in my life and having new experiences. I really struggled to get ideas. I was barely writing any short fiction near the beginning. Another thing that was really hard for me is pre-pandemic, I was basically doing most of my writing out of the house. Like, I was going to coffee shops to write most of the time. That was my routine, and it was kind of hard to adjust back to that, I think, especially because that is kind of how I had separated my work life from my writing life, so that writing didn't feel like an extension of work. I like to keep those things kind of separate. I was working from home, but then I would go write in cafes. I had kind of gotten into a habit of doing very little of my writing at my actual house. Maybe 70% of my writing was happening in kind of 2 or 3 cafe writing sessions per week. I've seen a lot of people say that it's really hard for them because, you know, they have nothing to do and they're really bored and everything is stressful, and I totally relate to that. I got to a point a few months ago where I was so bored, which I don't normally get bored, but I was so bored that I realized that the only way to do anything interesting or have any interesting experiences is to write. So I've been writing a lot. That's like the most interesting thing there is to do. So that is part of why I've been writing so much. A lot of people asked how I don't get overwhelmed or how I keep from getting overwhelmed when I have so many projects. I work in a system I call blocks. I've talked about this in a couple of videos. Basically, I'm working on a ton of things at once, but I try to just approach them one at a time for periods of about a week to 3 weeks. And I usually have my next few blocks ordered out. So the block I'm working on right now is the first draft of a short story. Normally I don't do 2 simultaneously, but I'm kind of doing 2 simultaneously right now. The other one I'm working on is revisions on Honey Vinegar. I have just a couple little revisions I want to do so I can pass it on to be critiqued. After that, I'm gonna have edits on a short story from workshop feedback. And once all those things are off my plate, then my next larger block will be drafting Holding a Ghost. I'm very relaxed with my writing routine. I think for me there is a balance between not putting too much pressure on myself and reminding myself that writing is the most fulfilling thing in my life right now, and when I don't do it, I feel really unfulfilled. I don't put pressure on myself. I'm very relaxed in my process, and you guys know that. So obviously I'm not forcing myself to write a ton, but I do think there's something to be said about the fact that when I'm not writing, it's not good for me, and writing is really important for me right now to regulate my brain and my emotions and my stress. This is something that I've observed for myself since I was 15, that if I'm not writing at least somewhat regularly, I don't really have a way to expel stress. I can be a very stressed out person very easily, and so I think for me, writing in the pandemic is finding a balance between using writing to regulate stress and find fulfillment rather than using it as something that creates more stress. Hello, friends. It is I, your local friendly neighborhood arts boy, coming to you from my daily sanity walk. Ever since I cut off my hair, I realized that I look like such a stereotypical arts boy. I've just decided to embrace it. If you can't beat him, join him. So I'm making that my personality now. If I DM you at like 1 a.m. asking you if you want to listen to Tame Impala on vinyl and frame it in a way that makes me seem like I'm intellectually superior to you, that's why. One of the things I'm trying to focus on in this vlog is how to not get overwhelmed when you're writing multiple projects, because a lot of people ask me that in my video on like every book I'm writing. The most common question was, how do you not get overwhelmed? And the truth is, I just work on one thing at a time. I have a very short attention span when it comes to my writing. I can only really work on one project for maybe a week to maybe max 3 weeks before I start to get, bored is not the word, before I start to get restless and I need to move on to something else. It's really crucial for my writing process, actually even to maintain the quality of my work, that I switch up the project I'm writing very often. I have learned that every single time I say, oh, I'm gonna work on 2 things at once, I can manage it, I end up just working on one. Like basically, I work on things in compressed short time frames. Even when I'm working on a long novel, I just work on a portion of that novel in a compressed time frame for a short amount of time. So when I was writing Honey Vinegar, it took 18 months, but I wasn't working on it every single month of those 18 months. I would work on it intensely for a couple weeks and then not look at it for a bit. I had said in the first clip of this video that I was working on 2 things, the first draft of a short story and edits on Honey Vinegar, which every single time I try to work on 2 things at once, it becomes abundantly clear that I can't do that. And so I'm just gonna work on the short story. This is one of those lessons that I've learned many times and yet continually don't learn. And it's just work on one thing until it's done. So this draft of the short story, it's called I Am a Wolf in Wolf's Clothing. It's something I've been thinking about for about a month maybe. And I feel like I have a solid handle on it and the voice and what happens. And so I should be able to finish it literally by the end of the week. It's not gonna be a very long story. I'm about 2,000 words in. Then it will be out of my brain. With short stories especially, they create little like mental blocks where it's like I need to finish it before I can move on to the next thing. Does that make sense? So that's what we're working on. Gonna try to get that done this week and then I'll just do my Honey Vinegar revisions. It is overwhelming to have a lot of projects on your brain at once, which is why you kind of need to just have only one on your brain at once. Hello. It's pretty late. It's 10 to 9. I'm kind of getting a late start on writing for the day. Like I said earlier, I find it so hard to start working on edits, so I have 9 things on my Honey Vinegar draft 4 to-do list. Some of them are pretty small, 2 of them are quite major. I'm probably gonna leave the major ones to the end. So to kind of ease myself into these edits, I'm gonna start by doing some of the little ones. It's almost 9, so I don't expect this to be like a long work day, but I'm gonna see if I can kind of just like check off some of the littler changes. So like there's a conversation with one character that I just wanted to like adjust a little. I had a similar list of little changes to make at the end of my last draft. After I did the full draft, a bunch of things had come up where I made notes to go back and revise them later, and I found that it was nice kind of to start by just getting rid of all the little things, like go add this paragraph, go adjust this detail. So I'm gonna see if I can start in a similar way. That seems like the easiest way to start. I don't know, if you, like me, get really overwhelmed with editing, start with some little tasks, and I find that helps build momentum, and then you kind of feel more capable of tackling the major things. Hello. I've kind of moved on to what I consider the next block, and kind of the purpose of this vlog was to show how I work on multiple projects. So the last block I was working on was the first draft of a short story. So that story is called I Am a Wolf in Wolf's Clothing, and I started writing that piece in December, but unfortunately when I got about 500 words in, I had kind of a tech mishap and I lost most of the progress. I lost everything except the first paragraph, even though I had backed up the work. Anyways, it's a long story. After losing it, I tried to write it back out from memory. I got really frustrated because I didn't really have a concept for the story. I mean, it's interesting. I've been trying to go back to my old short fiction process, which was almost more methodical and there was more room for like growth and for the story to evolve. I kind of messed up my process. I kind of went a bit astray and I hadn't been happy with a lot of the stories I'd been producing, and I realized that I'd been approaching stories kind of in a way that doesn't work for me. So the way that I used to write stories was very methodical. I would basically start from an opening image or an opening line without much understanding of the context or the meaning or really anything, and I would write through the story as a means of figuring it out, and as details cropped up, I would go, oh wait, that's important, and I would basically build the story by writing it, you know, like write a detail and then go, wait, that detail is important, and that's how the story would be built rather than going in with an understanding of everything. And that's how I wrote for a long time, and it is a slower way to write, and that method produced really good work for me, but it's not a process that feels very confident. Like while you're writing it, you don't really know what's going on. Yeah, maybe like mid 2019, I felt that I'd unlocked something, and that was a better way of building short stories. I would basically build my concept from a few distinct specific details. And I still remember the first story where I think I did this. It was a story I wrote in like the summer of 2019 called Migration of Crows. And going into that story, I had a few really cool specific details, and I was like, let's just smush them all together. That'll make a great story. And I remember being really excited about the story before I started writing it. There was no room for the story to breathe and evolve. There was no room for it to gather meaning, or for those details to gather meaning, because the details don't gather meaning because you go in knowing them. I found that the details that gathered meaning in my short fiction were the ones that cropped up without intention while I was writing them, and I would go, oh, that's important and intriguing. And so I really struggled with my short fiction through 2020. I didn't submit any story that I had written in 2020 until October. I submitted a story to a contest, and then in December I started submitting some stuff I'd written later in the year, but pretty much everything I wrote in the first 2/3 of the year I didn't submit. And I realized recently what I think the issue was, and it was this thing where I was going in too confident. There was no uncertainty, and there was no room for the stories to accumulate meaning and to gather depth. And I realized this with a story that I wrote in late December called How to Slaughter. And that story, I felt like I used my old process, and it felt like how I wrote stories in 2018, 2017. Like, it felt like my old process. I started from the beginning without really much knowledge of where the story would go, and I worked through it linearly, and I observed the story. I'm gonna go pop on the light, because this lighting's kind of weird. I'd been, going in overconfident, leaving underwhelmed, like really excited about these cool specific details I had, and then nothing came of them, and the stories felt thin, they felt surface level, and I wasn't getting attached to them. I abandoned so many stories that I wrote. I wasn't submitting any new work because I was never happy with it. And I finally realized when writing that story, How to Slaughter, what my issue had been. And so after How to Slaughter, the story that I was working on was this one, I'm a Wolf in Wolf's Clothing. That was a really long tangent. And I was trying to approach it in the same way. So that story, similar to How to Slaughter, I started from the beginning with a very vague impression of what the story would be like and let it crystallize as I drafted, which is how I used to write stories, and with those stories there would always come a moment partway through the story where I'd go, oh, this is what it's about, and this is the idea, and this is the crux, and really exciting to go back to. It's just a more involved process, Like I said, I lost the work, and that kind of killed my motivation to write it. Because that opening passage had been written with that line-by-line method, it was very intentional, very bizarre. The voice of that story is really strange. I almost see the voice more like a poem, like I wrote it how I would write a poem. The punctuation is really intricate, and it's just like a very weird story. The main character is like a very particular, she has a very particular way of thinking that is very odd. I tried to write it out by memory, but I just couldn't. It wasn't as good, and I was really frustrated that I'd lost this passage of work that I'd been so proud of. Even though I didn't even know what the concept of the story was, I just knew the way the characters thought, and I kind of had an idea for like the mood and the form. I don't know, I'm really weird in that way. I tend to think of forms before concept. Normally you'd think that you'd think of the concept and then you'd base the form off the concept. I kind of work backwards, not because I want to. My brain just thinks of forms first, and then through exploring the form, the concept emerges. It's a backwards way to work. I ended up actually recovering the work I'd lost. When I recovered it, instantly I was super excited again. I kind of blended the two openings together to get the best of both, like the one I'd originally written and the one I'd written from memory. Through writing it line by line by line, I had my breakthrough about what the concept was. I had a really fun time writing this story because it's kind of insane. Kind of approached it like a prose poem. Like, a lot of the lines feel more like a line you'd have in a poem than in a fiction piece, but that was kind of my intention, so I had a lot of fun drafting that. So I finished that on the weekend, and I'm probably gonna submit it to my workshop fairly soon. But now that that's done, I'm moving on to my next block, which is some honey vinegar edits. I'm on what I'm considering the 4th draft. It's hard to say how many drafts there's been. There are parts that I've read over and edited literally 20 times, so is it the 4th draft? I don't know. I have 9 things on my to-do list. Some of them are really tiny, 2 of them are a bit more major. There's nothing huge, but like 2 slightly more intricate edits, so I'm kind of leaving those to the end. I enjoy editing once I start. It's hard to get myself to start. The way I'm trying to approach them is I'm just trying to start with the easiest little ones, knock those off my to-do list. I did 2 of them yesterday. I'm gonna try to get through 2 more today, and hopefully it won't take that long, and by the time I get to those bigger edits, I'm really in the flow of the story and the draft. This is the process I used last time. Like when I did my last draft, I edited the whole book, and by the time I had edited the whole book, I had accumulated some more little things I wanted to go back and change. I did the same thing. Started with the little ones, worked up to the harder ones, and I found that by the time I got to the harder ones, I felt like I was really had momentum. So that's kind of the way I'm doing that. I would like to get those edits done soon. The only thing is that I'm getting a story workshopped on Thursday. It's Tuesday today. How to Slaughter, the story I talked about earlier. My worst habit as a writer, like it is the worst habit I have, is that it takes me so long to edit things. It doesn't take me so long to edit things, it takes me so long to start editing. Like I procrastinate editing, and it's really a bad habit. Like in the past, I have procrastinated editing stories for months and months and months, and then when I did the edits, it took 1 or 2 days. So I'm trying to break out of that habit. I've been trying to do my edits as soon as possible because I know it's a really bad habit and I'm trying to break it. And I know that the longer I think about edits, the more I overthink them, and then it's harder to start. I would really like to do the edits immediately, even though I know that I keep procrastinating this honey vinegar draft with short fiction stuff. I would really like to just get those edits done and submit the story and have more stuff to submit. Submitting short fiction is the primary source of my serotonin these days. I don't have too many stories to submit at the moment. I'm only submitting 2, and one of them is Kudzu Girls, and that one is honestly ceremonial more than anything because it's never going to be accepted. It's literally been rejected 24 times. We've lost hope for that one at this point. I just keep submitting it. I don't know why. I just guess I don't want to give up. So I'd love to have another story to submit just so I can have more stuff out and feel like I'm a productive human being and get that sweet, sweet dopamine that clicking submit gives me. I'm gonna do as many of the edits that I can on honey vinegar this week, and then on the weekend try to edit How to Slaughter. Obviously I haven't had it workshopped, so I don't know how substantive the edits will be, so maybe I won't be able to do them in one weekend, but I'd like to at least get started. And I know that historically it usually doesn't take more than 3 or 4 days to edit a short story, and I especially feel that this one is pretty clean. So we shall see. If I could get that edited by the end of the weekend, that would be awesome, and then hopefully finish up my honey vinegar edits by the end of the month. I've set myself a deadline of February 15th for these. Ideally, I'd like to be done them by the end of the month. So that's kind of what's on the table. After all of that is done, I'm gonna go back to Holding a Ghost. Haven't worked on that since November, and I'm starting to miss it, but I really do want to get all the editing work I have to do out of the way, or else I will use drafting to procrastinate editing. Hello everyone. So it is about, what time? 1:30 on the Friday. So I had mentioned earlier that I was kind of juggling 2 things right now, my honey vinegar edits and revisions on a short story called How to Slaughter. So I'd kind of wanted to try and do those How to Slaughter revisions this weekend. That is still the plan. I had my workshop yesterday. Shout out to my workshop group. They're so smart and I love them so much. They gave me really, really great, intelligent edits that I'm really excited to play around with. There are a few edits that I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to approach, but some other really concrete things that I want to do. So I think that once I start working on the concrete things, hopefully the more abstract things will fall into place, usually as I find the way. However, I do think it's extremely overly ambitious to think that I could edit that whole short story in one weekend. It's a long story. It's like 6,400 words, and I took 2,000 words of notes during our workshop. We do our workshops just like over Discord video chat. There's 4 of us, so 1 person getting workshopped and 3 people talking at a time. That's like a good amount for us. I think with 3 people we get pretty complete discussions on the story. It's obviously a step down from when we used to workshop in school. We'd have like 15 people, but with 15 people working, there's not as much chance for each person to like discuss as openly, kind of. So there's not as much time for each person to talk. So it's really nice, I think, with just 3 people talking at a time. We get really in-depth discussions, and usually our workshops last about 45 minutes. I think I just would need more time to edit the story than 2 days. I don't think it's gonna take months, but it might take like a week. It looks like it's gonna end up being one of my longest stories, which is fun for me. But I am also still working on my honey vinegar edits. So after I did a few of the littler tasks, I started working on a bit of a larger task yesterday, which I didn't have time to finish because we had our workshop in the evening, so I didn't have much time to work on that between finishing work and doing our workshop. Bit more of a detailed edit. I'm really like reshaping a whole scene, and so adding a lot of stuff to that scene. Like I rewrote a whole beginning part, but I started to get really into it, and so now I think I'm gonna just go through in order for the most part. I have one edit that pertains to the first part of the book, and that's probably going to be the most intricate edit because I have to go, it's going to be like little tiny changes throughout the first part, but no like full scenes or anything. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing everything that goes through the end of part 2. I don't really know exactly how I'm going to balance this like How to Slaughter revision and the honey vinegar edit. I guess I'm kind of just working on those things concurrently. As I said earlier in this video, every time I try to work on two things concurrently, one will just end up taking precedent and I'll just end up working on that. But I would like to at least make a solid dent of the honey vinegar edits today. Try to at least finish the chapter I'm working on. Hello! So, I am once again vlogging in the park. It's about 3 p.m. So I'm just out on my daily walk, and I thought I would film a clip outdoors just because to break things up, honestly. I mentioned last clip or another clip that I kind of had 2 things I wanted to work on, but as always with me, if I try to work on 2 things concurrently, one will just take precedence, and that's exactly what happened. I did not look at How to Slaughter at all over the weekend. I just worked on honey vinegar, but I'm almost done those edits. I got on a good roll with my honey vinegar edits. I don't want to break the immersion that I have with this. Editing is, again, I enjoy editing once I start editing, but it's hard to start. I find it really overwhelming. Okay, sorry, it's cold. This may be the more cool way to wear a beanie, but it's not the warmest way, so we have to readjust. It's really hard for me to start editing. Once I start, it's fine, I enjoy it actually, but I don't ever want to start, and so I didn't want to break that momentum once I had started, and I only had a few tasks left, especially when one of those tasks was one of the larger edits that was a bit scarier to take on. However, it ended up being totally fine. So now I only have one thing left to do, and my goal is to do that today. It's the trickiest, like most finicky edit. It's not like I can just go to one scene and fix it. It's more like I have to look through the whole first part of the book, which is like 200 pages, more than 200 pages, probably like 250 pages, to kind of look at how that can be threaded in. So it's not the easiest task. As much as I want to edit that story, I was like, I cannot break the immersion that I have with these honey vinegar edits right now. I'm in the zone, let's not ruin it. Honestly, I feel really great about it, and I feel like editing this book has really proved to me that I'm capable of editing, and it doesn't even have to take a super long time. It doesn't have to be super overwhelming. Like, I think the editing process for this book has given me a lot of confidence with revision. These edits only took like, what, a week to do? Okay, like I can just sit down and do it and get it done in like 2 weeks. A week will be good, and I think that it is a really nice feeling, because truly the tragedy of my life is that I write things and then I have to spend 5 times as long editing them, and then I just still have to keep editing things because I wrote them and I want to write new things, and then when I write those new things I just have to edit them again. What? It's so unfair. This is not what I signed up for. My increasing confidence with the editing process is very— oh my god, are my knuckles going blue? Sorry, I'm really distracted by everything, but just like my fingers are literally— I don't know if you can see this— going blue. Like, look at that. Like, that's how cold— it's not even that cold out. What? Okay, if I get frostbite and die, then this can be found footage of that. So I had said that after all of this, so after the honey vinegar edits, after editing How to Slaughter, after finishing drafting and editing my other story, I Am a Wolf in Wolf Clothing, I will have all my editing tasks done, and I will go back to writing Holding a Ghost. That is still the plan. I have said, and this happens every time, every single time I'm like, I'm gonna take a break from short story stuff, a new short story emerges. This always happens. Every single time I get through my queue of active short stories that I'm working on, I'm like, the coast is clear, we can just not think about short stories for a bit. I won't get a new idea for months, and then I get a new idea for one. What is happening? A story popped into the brain yesterday without my permission. I did not ask for it, but I really like it. And this is always how it is. I'm like, I didn't ask for you, but I like you. I'm not sure if it's a novel or a short story. I'm gonna try to write it as a short story because I don't want to commit to a whole novel, but I genuinely feel like it's a novel, and it's like, god damn it. The thing is, I kind of have this theory, at least for me and my brain, I don't know if this is true for everyone, most ideas can be short stories but if you let them get to the point where they become novels, you can't rewind them. I started thinking of all these different facets of it that felt like it was more than could fit in a short story, and it kind of felt like more like a sparse novel, like a short novel, and I was like, I just wanted to rant about how mad I am about that. I don't want to, but at the same time I like it and it seems interesting. That's all for now, guys. I'm gonna close off this video. Was there any point to this vlog whatsoever? I don't know. Did I teach you how to write in the pandemic? I don't think I did. Do I know how to write in the pandemic? I don't know. Did I teach you how to write multiple projects? I don't think so. Do I know how to write multiple projects? Jury's still out on that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any questions, you can always send me an ask on Tumblr, and I'll see you in another video.